Hello guys, before I even get started with the intro, I wanted to state a spoiler warning. In this video, we'll be talking about the geological locations of Echoes of Wisdom with very little storyline plots. If you have not played the game or have not finished the game, this is your spoiler warning. Now that that's out of the way, as a big Link to the Past fan, I was basically fangirling the whole time I was playing the central portion of Hyrule. This area of the map is a pretty close 1-to-1 scale of A Link to the Past. However, to understand the significance of both games' maps, we first have to talk a little bit about A Link to the Past along with a map of Echoes of Wisdom. For those of you that haven't played A Link to the Past in years, or maybe never even played it at all, this is going to be a brief synopsis geographically with small story progression. We're going to start at the very beginning with our boy Link's house. In A Link to the Past, we can see a cottage up on a small hill with some bushes. This is where Link lives. Anytime you fall in battle, you'll most likely end up here, so it's a fairly remembered spot. This same hill is found in Echoes of Wisdom, but sadly, Link's home has moved locations for this game, so it's kind of just a small hill mainly used as a reference marker if you know A Link to the Past. Following the natural path of gameplay, we're headed up to Hyrule Castle. There isn't a castle town here, but more of a castle courtyard swarming with hostile guards. The courtyard is rather kempt with a few bushes, flowers, and trees, while sporting green, blue, and red guards protecting the castle. Where in Echoes, there's a very nice castle town full of lovely townfolk, shops, guards, and a few cute pets. Like in Twilight Princess and Ocarina of Time, along with other games, Echoes has a large fountain in the center of the castle town. This also mirrors the activeness in the town as well, a town full of hustling people living their lives, knights standing guard all around the town and castle protecting it from intruders, and a few shops scattered around the town. However, the interior of the castle in A Link to the Past is a full-on dungeon with a boss. Granted, this kinda did act as the tutorial for this game, showing you how the future dungeons would work. Nonetheless, we still had a small dungeon. In Echoes, the dungeon isn't nearly as big. There is a small dungeon area very similar to A Link to the Past holding cells, so there isn't really a standard dungeon within this castle like the previous games. After we liberate the lovely Princess Zelda from the castle, we end up at the Sanctuary. For those of you that might not have a clear idea of what this is, it's basically the holy place in Hyrule and a place for their dead to rest. This is a beautiful place, truly a work of art with big stained glass windows all around the sanctuary. Contrary to popular belief, this is a freestanding building and it's not made into the mountainside. Now, in Echoes of Wisdom, you can see this is a freestanding building surrounded by flowered hedges with a breezeway to the right to the cemetery. Now, when you played A Link to the Past, you probably know that this particular headstone in the Light World has the magical cape. Directly correlated within Echoes of Wisdom, this same stone has a cave entrance. They do this quite a lot in the game, hinting back to A Link to the Past and various other games. Proceeding to the next location, we're headed to the Eastern Palace area. In A Link to the Past, we have to go over to the stone hut and talk to our buddy Sriracha. Yes, I know that this actually isn't his name, but I unbelievably butcher this every time I say it, so we're just going to call him Sriracha for this video. To get to him, we have to go through a part of a labyrinth, but once we get to the house and we talk to him, we find out there are 3 locations on the map that we have to retrieve pendants from, one being the actual Eastern Palace right next door. In Echoes of Wisdom, they did leave a smaller version of the Eastern Palace labyrinth, and where Sriracha's house was, there's now a moblin camp as a nod to this area. Scooting over to the actual Eastern Palace and A Link to the Past, this is where you would get the Pendant of Courage and the bow. The outside of the palace has 4 decorative statues on the dungeon entrance, along with 2 pillars at the bottom corners. Where in Echoes, they kept almost the exact same design for the outside of the dungeon. And yes, I did say dungeon. This layout for the Eastern Palace is almost identical to A Link Between Worlds as well. After we obtained the Pendant of Courage, I like to head towards the Desert Palace to get the Power Glove and the Pendant of Wisdom. This was a puzzle dungeon entrance where you had to venture up towards Kakariko Village and find the Book of Medora and read to the stones to make the Rockheads move to gain access to the dungeon. Once you play into the dungeon for a little while, you have the opportunity to go out of either of the sides of the entrance that look similar to heads. This whole place is guarded by pesky crows and guildmen. In Echoes of Wisdom, you have sand piranhas, a few small scorpions, and tornadoes guarding the now forgotten temple. All the entrances have crumbled and are no longer accessible, but you can see very clearly that these are the same heads from A Link to the Past. It even has a platform out front where the stone should be to access the dungeon. There are 3 extra points I'd like to draw attention to. First, where the heart piece was, there is now a might piece. There's a cave here in both games, and where you would find the Bombos medallion, you can find a large land mola mini-boss making a sandstorm in the desert. You can take it out pretty quickly for some monster stones. Now for the 3rd and final pendant that you would find in the northern mountains in the Tower of Hera. However, there isn't really anything that stands out structurally in Echoes for A Link to the Past other than a lot of caves. It's more reminiscent of Snow Peak from Twilight Princess. We have majority of the large locations expanded on, so let's start with some of the other areas. Let's start with the Lumberjack area. In A Link to the Past, this little cutaway leads to a small bungalow. With a half-cut tree to the southeast of the house, you can use the Pegasus boots to dash into it to expose a cave holding a heart piece and some fairies. To the east, there's also an entrance to the Lost Woods for quick access to the magic mushroom for the witch. Up above the cottage there's a small cave. Now the small cave is also located in the same spot in Echoes of Wisdom. This is the best way to get up to the snowy peaks of Mount Lanayru to mend the huge rift up there. However, sadly the lumberjacks have been long forgotten and their small cottage is completely missing. There's also no traditional path to the Lost Woods to the left either. Of course, with a new gameplay style, there's always an option to go over the trees, except really for this one area. These Lost Woods are kinda like Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. They send you back to where you were if you try to enter before you're allowed to within the story. Moving on to the next location, it really wouldn't be a good comparison video without talking about the rocks to the right of Hyrule. Since the very beginning trailer, a lot of people immediately seen the similarities to A Link to the Past map, starting with these rocks and their placement next to Hyrule. However, just like the mother game, there really isn't too much going on in this area besides enemies. It is still a path you have to use occasionally, but warping so much faster, especially in this game when 90% of the game is free to roam after the tutorial's over, so you can just really explore the map and open up the waypoints for easy travel. Going up northwest, we have the Zora area in A Link to the Past. This is where you would obtain the Zora flippers from the Zora King so you can swim around in deeper water. In the Dark World, you can also get the Quake medallion from the catfish in the circular area once you chunk a rock in there. Now, it doesn't exactly translate verbatim to Echoes of Wisdom's map, but around the same area you find the catfish, you'll also find a heart piece in this area. After looking over this map for as long as I have, there are quite a few small location references to A Link to the Past. Whether that's heart pieces, caves, or might stones, most of them line up to something significant in A Link to the Past. Just like anyone that's seen the map of Echoes of Wisdom and A Link to the Past seen the wooded area where you can talk to the flute boy and later on dig up the flute at this location as well. In Echoes of Wisdom there isn't an NPC, but if you drop a mole at the same location where the flute is in A Link to the Past, you'll find a might stone. I think these things are a very cool nod to the map's connection of the games. Most new players won't understand the references, but if they did decide to play the other games, I would imagine it's the same experience we have with this game. I digress, now let's head to the lake area below Link's house. This whole area is a pretty much 1-to-1 scale of A Link to the Past, and honestly it makes me so happy. Here's a side-by-side comparison. There are a few things that are off like the decor, but the staples are really still there. The cave is moved from the right side in the bend of the wall to the left side behind some pillars. Sadly, there's no fairy fountains in the cave, but in Echoes of Wisdom this seems to be a running theme in the game. We'll talk more about this in a little while. One of the two main defining features in this area is a group of pillars in the center right. They have all the pillars in a little moat from A Link to the Past, but this time they decided to add a heart piece as a puzzle prize. I was very surprised to see this layout in this area be so similar to the original map. Just like the entrance to the Swamp Palace, in A Link to the Past this can be entered in both worlds. In the light world, we go inside to do some block work and lever pulling to have the water empty, not only to get a fish to release or resell to the market guy in Kakariko, but this also allows us to get into the Swamp Palace in the Dark World. However, in Echoes of Wisdom, this is just a reminder of an NES dungeon. Maybe we'll get a DLC having something here. It felt really strange not to be able to enter this area. Do you remember this area that led to literally nothing at the south of the map? This now flows perfectly into the Suthorn area of Echoes of Wisdom. I was so happy to see this area actually get expanded on. It never really felt finished in A Link to the Past. I know that it was finished, but the area leading to nothing just felt really odd for Nintendo to leave in. They have a way of making the most of their maps. You guys probably remember this scene and seeing the new unlearned landscape unfold in front of us. We are headed to the origin of this trailer, Lake Hylia. In this shot we can see an island with a cave which we'll expand on in a moment. I wanted to give you guys a side-by-side comparison here to truly see the similarities between the two maps. These mountains here are the same, the actual space of the lake is the same, and you can see where it's assumed time has eroded some of the land, making it more dissolved. Like you can clearly tell that this used to extend all the way over to the shallow spot. Now actually diving into Lake Hylia, we have a pretty similar island in the middle. In both games, this is a great fairy fountain where you can get upgrades. One for how many bombs and arrows you can hold, and the others for how many accessories you can wear, including the Zora flippers from earlier. They are present in both games, but with different functions. With the accessory allowance from the fairy, you can wear up to 4 items at a time with a wishing donation, of course. For example, in this game, you can wear the frog ring for jumping and the flippers, and they don't interfere with the gameplay, they just really enhance it. I plan to expand on the items in this game in a longer video, so for now I'm going to leave that as it is. Getting back on track here, this fountain also has free roaming fairies that you can actually place in a bottle again. Granted, this actually is a fairy bottle, so if the bottle's empty, they'll just go in with no help. But you actually can't hold anything other than a fairy, where a standard bottle you can hold anything including liquids, hearts, soup, spores, bees, and insects, along with fairies and quite a few other items. So before battles, if you have a low number of hearts, consider seeing the Great Fairy over at the Isle of Happiness in both games, for some extra perks and some free roaming fairies. One of the other things I noticed from the trailer is the spawnable wall. That cave in the overview of this image sealed the landscape for me. You have the castle, the Pinball Rocks, the Great Ferry, the corner of the Eastern Palace area, the mountains to the north, the pillars below Link's house in A Link to the Past, and even this bombable wall. I was sure that this was going to be a close map of A Link to the Past, but I don't think I realized how close it was actually going to be, but I knew it was going to be at least notably similar. The next two locations are either removed content from A Link to the Past or just kind of a theory. We're going to start with the ruins to the west of Hyrule Castle. Now, looking at the map of A Link to the Past, you'll see what is very close to this area. We know this isn't Kakariko Village in Echoes of Wisdom due to it being further west, but I also don't think this is the ruins of an old village. With a general view of both areas, you can see the questionable resemblance. Echoes of Wisdom's ruins are smaller and more rectangular than the original to the right. When looking at the maps from this point of view, this could in fact be the village ruins, but in-game you see these are pillars and not really abandoned structures. This looks more like an abandoned temple rather than homes, so realistically there are two options. This is the developer's way of putting an old Kakariko village in as an Easter egg, or this is a completely different settlement altogether. I'm leaning more towards a new settlement. Although there is a cave in the middle of the ruins like the Weather Vein in A Link to the Past, this layout really isn't close to the size or shape of the original. What do you think? Is this a new area or a nod to the old village? Next we have some removed content from A Link to the Past that looks like it's resurfaced in Echoes of Wisdom. Some of you guys might know that this castle was originally supposed to be a lot bigger than the final cut that we have on the game. There were quite a few rooms cut, but the room I really want to talk about in this video is a bedroom. Not just any bedroom though. Look at the comparison between the two. This could quite possibly have been planned to be the princess's room in A Link to the Past. We have virtually no information on what any of these rooms are or were planned to be. I actually had to go digging for these photos. However, it does look like they try to add a lot of the removed content from A Link to the Past to Echoes. Just like this ship, if you didn't know, you can lock onto it and make an opening to enter it as a kind of a bonus dungeon. It has a few small rooms full of items and crates for a quick stock up and a heart piece after you finish fighting the boss. This was a full throwback from lost data from A Link to the Past. There's actually files for a pirate ship dungeon, or at the very least a ship. These are the only photos of the lost files. There really isn't any direction that they point for what it might actually be, but I'm very happy that they revisited this idea. I know this isn't the only ship dungeon in the franchise, but with the map being so similar to A Link to the Past, this has to be a direct callback from that game. Kind of ironically, this game is basically an accumulation of the best aspects of the past games echoing together to make a new game from a new perspective. There are quite a lot of past enemies going as far back as the very beginning. They merged multiple maps to create a huge unique map for us to enjoy. They also brought back the standard dungeon full of puzzles with a new way to figure them out due to the new Echoes mechanic. They also took the art style of the remake of Link's Awakening and handpicked some of the coolest designs from the past games and put them into this new art style. And they made the freedom happen from the Tears of the Wild duo. They really put their hearts into this game, and honestly I applaud them. Both A Link to the Past and Echoes of Wisdom are and will be pivotal games in the development of future games. They both hold huge milestones even if they aren't apparent yet. I really hope you guys enjoyed my geological comparison of these two games. This was really fun on my end, and I hope to bring more content like this to my channel in the future. If you enjoyed this video, remember to drop a like and share this with a fellow Zelda fan. To see more content from me in the future, don't forget to subscribe below. I also stream almost every weekend playing a game you guys pick for us to 100%, so if you haven't, make sure to turn on my post notifications so you'll never miss a video or stream. Thank you guys so much for watching. Until next time, make sure to grab a snack and stay away from the ruling ring.